Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Today I have Manny Cartoon with me today. Manny, is that your handle? Is that what we go by?
Yeah, explaining Aguilera to people in the early 2000s was a little bit more trouble than I wanted, so I started going by Cartoon and it kind of stuck.
It honestly has a nice ring to it, so.
Thank you.
To do a little history lesson for the people listening is that you and I got connected through the podcast that I did with the AID podcast, correct, with Mark Bricky. We've been chatting it up back and forth. We've done a couple projects together and we've, done some fun things. And I got to say, I like working with you. I mean, it's fun. And I think you and I have a good chemistry when we work together. But I also love your style. And I think that's what kind of connected us together in the first place is you've been pumping out a lot of great stuff on Instagram and kind of building up your catalog of work. And I know one of the things you and I first talked about when we connected was kind of this concept of, when do you start? When do you take that leap? How do you overcome the fear of going full time? What does that look like? And for me, I mean, it was 5-6 years ago since I did that, but it's still fresh in my mind every day because it was such a monumental step in my process and step towards, I'm going to say freedom, but it was a big move professionally to kind of take that leap. So where are you at in that process? And let's just talk about fear for a minute and what that looks like for you.
All right. So cards on the table. I am in my third version of my career. I graduated from design school in the early 2000s, 2003 or so, was full-time in-house, and somebody was like, oh, why don't you go to a comic book convention? And I said, okay, I've always read comics. Let's check that out. Let's see what that looks like. So I went to my first one with some friends and then was introduced to tabling as an artist and all that stuff and started doing all that. Little by little, started doing it more often, usually in part with a full-time gig as a sort of a safety net. And that kind of, I fell in love with doing that and doing more freelance design, logo design, brand design kind of stuff on a very sort of local level. Would proceed to get burned out on it because I was, looking back on it, I guess I wasn't doing it right. I was doing a lot of the same stuff. I was being the Cheesecake Factory of design. Like, people would bring me something and I'd say, okay, well, I can do something in that style. I can do that and whatever. And that's not really fulfilling. That's not really fun. That's not really, that's more of the same kind of stuff that I was already doing at work. And that's just burning the candle at both ends. And it was this cycle where I would do full-time freelance for a while because I'd get enthusiastic, or at one point I had gone full-time in-house, lost my job, and was kind of forced into full-time freelance. And that went okay, giant question mark, for long enough. And then one of the clients from there told me, to come in and go full-time with him. And it's been this cycle. Fear played a big part in that. Fear was, I take everything that comes in the door because God knows when something's going to come in again. I got to please the clients that I'm getting because who knows when I'm going to get another client. I'll bend over backwards and, undercharge and, try to match a style and try to do a thing and try to be a thing that I'm not, because I can do it. And that's something that I think young designers do a lot of, is mistaking the fact that they can do something for something that they want to do, or something that they can specialize in or do well at.
It's funny because I had this conversation with a young artist today, and he was asking me questions and asking me, basically how to get to the point where he could take that leap, and how do I balance the stuff that I have to do to pay the bills versus the stuff that I want to do. And my answer to him is, it's similar that you kind of mentioned that. My answer to him and to all young artists is that you're always going to have to do some stuff that pays the bills. You gotta be able to read the landscape and kind of understand that some of those things are going to lead to other things. So sometimes it's, yes, let me take the stuff that bears fruit, pays my bills, or potentially leads to more. but it is on us individually as artists to carry that balance of how much stuff I'm going to do to pay the bills versus how much stuff I'm going to do that I want to do. So you were talking a little bit earlier about, kind of doing that stuff where you had to mimic somebody else's style or try to replicate the request of the customer. And I think I'm with you because I've done that same thing. That stuff that's break even kind of work because you don't get to shine. Like you don't get to shine within somebody else's recipe. And it's
you don't get to shine. You don't really learn anything new. You might pick a little crumb up that you can take with you. And at the end of the day, it's not something that you want to do again. Like if you did it and you didn't love it and you don't want to do it again, you're just chasing your tail. You're not moving forward. You're going around in a circle. It's like it's taking you nowhere.
And what I would add to that is if you want to put distance between where you're at and where you want to be, if you want to jump forward, you got to do the stuff you love. Because doing the stuff that, again, you still got to pay the bills. So don't hear me wrong on that. You got to pay the bills. But if you're looking to grow, you got to reserve time on your plate, time in your schedule, and time in the work you're choosing to put out there. It has to be stuff you love to do because that's the stuff that will accelerate the process and will accelerate the growth.
Yeah, it's tough to tell somebody who's starving that you can't be desperate. You can't. It's not going to help. It might pay short-term dividends, but it's not going to grow anything. Doing the same thing that you're doing at your day job, freelance, is only going to get you more of the same kind of work. That's all that grows there. The best bit of advice that I ever heard was if you're using Instagram as the field, say, one side of the sort of the metric is what you love doing. Where does that intersect with what people are paying most attention to, actually interacting with, commenting? What can you monetize of that? Whether it's t-shirts or stickers or pins or who knows what, but it is that metric that it has to start with what you love the most and where does that intersect with what you can, turn that into.
No, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with what work you have to do to pay the bills is you have to be the maintainer of that balance. And that balance of the stuff you do because you have to versus the stuff you do because you want to, that balance is something that you can't lose sight of because, again, that's what's going to move the ball forward and that's the stuff that's going to get you paid down the road. One of the things you mentioned was, just that ability or kind of knowing when to choose one side or the other versus doing the responsible thing and only worrying about the paycheck or the bills or whatever it is. I have an answer for my own personal experience as to when I kind of rounded that corner or when it kind of clicked for me. What is that for you? What does that look like? And what advice would you give a young designer or somebody who's on the threshold of making that decision?
Be ridiculously, dangerously honest with yourself. Lying to yourself that you have enough clients to go full-time freelance and sinking is not great. I mean, a little bit of confidence goes a long way. But also, like, oh, I have these 3 guys and they say that they'll be around forever. No, that's not the way that works. But also, like, the couple of times I did it, I had a client that I was working with pretty consistently. He was throwing me work for real specialty stuff in the car wrap, in the business car wrap stuff. So, a lot of some fun clients for me as an illustrator at the time were a lot of food truck stuff. So he was throwing me a lot of that stuff. And he had an opening for a designer and he said, come in and, be my guy. And we talked about it and he was like, I'll still sell you as my premium package and you pocket that. But I pay you for the day to day and and I need you to do, and he outlined what it was. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. That seemed way smarter than anything else. I'd be right there to take the clients that really he was giving me the best stuff, client wise. Anyway, so it just made sense. One other time after that, I had been doing full time freelance and it wasn't going really well. And I was energized, and I had been to a conference recently, and things were looking not fantastic. And I had the opportunity to go full time at a job that was there, and I took that, and I started doing freelance on the side after I started there, and that was fine, because not everything's a cupcake. Not everything's a cupcake. It's not always going to be cupcakes.
No, and I would even say take those opportunities to, if there's a underbelly of your process that is a steady paycheck that keeps you not having to worry about that, and you can focus on doing fun stuff on your off time or whatever. Just have a plan, have a strategy, and have a plan as to how to balance those two things. I would say, the other thing is knowing where you want to go with it. I think a lot of young artists, especially in the cartoon comic book world, they want to draw and they want to just do all these things, but they're kind of waiting for somebody to develop the plan for them, or they're waiting to be discovered by Marvel or DC or whatever it is. I don't know that it works that way for most people. So you have to kind of go after.
I don't think it works, to be fair. I don't think it works that way anymore at all.
No, probably not. But unfortunately, that's kind of what we think. Because I even remember coming out of art school, I don't know if I thought I was going to get drafted, or like the scouts were going to come looking for me, or whatever it was that I was thinking. I didn't realize that I had to go kind of make my own luck there. And I referenced earlier kind of that breaking point for me, or that decision-making point for me, was I had planned ahead, and I had kind of decided if I'm going to do this, if I think I need 5 clients to start with, I went and got 8. I kind of patted myself a little bit to be ready to make the decision. But the breaking point for me to make the decision was I was all in. I decided that today's the day I'm going to make the decision. And if I crash and burn, so be it. Like, I'm just going to, all the chips on the table. That's when I knew I was ready. But some of the things that we're talking about here and the leading up to, I knew I wasn't ready up until that point, because I was still second guessing everything. I was still wondering if the paycheck was going to be there. I was still wondering if I could really do it. And it was, like you said, it's maybe a confidence thing, but once I developed the confidence with the grit, or maybe it was just the not giving a shit attitude, or whatever it was, when I
those are big deals. Those are big deals, and huge commodities. What I think is interesting is that you talk about bravery, but you also talk about making sure that if you think that you needed 4, you got 8. So there's confidence, and there's that earned bravery. And you had a lot more of that, in my opinion. You had a lot more of that second one. Yeah. Like you really planned ahead.
I had to build my own contingency, and that was the part that prior to, because I'm kind of like you, where I'd been kicking the can down the road for a long time, and doing freelance work on the side, and I was just busy all the time. But once it kind of became a real thought in my head, then it was like, okay, I have to plan for this. I have to plan a contingency. And if, God forbid, I come back with my tail between my legs, it's not going to be for the lack of trying. And once I kind of put all those things in place, to your point, the confidence to go all in, it wasn't that hard by then, because I'd already done all the work.
And look, I taught kids and teenagers for a really long time. And something I learned is no amount of no from somebody else is going to stop somebody who's ready to do something. We can say all day long, you need to have enough customers in place, and you need to have this, and you need to have that. It's awesome to see somebody say, no, I don't need that. I know, I'm good. And they fly. And you know what? They take off like a rocket, and they fly. And that's fantastic. But it's not everybody. It's just not. A lot of the podcasts in the freelancers side hustle space talk a lot about churn and burn and burn that midnight oil and hustle till forever. And you'll, with the implication that you'll burn all of this time and undo all of this work. And it almost makes you feel like as long as you keep working, it will happen. And it doesn't happen for everybody. If you never lift your head up, if you're always working and whatever, the only thing that's sure in life is that life will pass you by. You'll miss out on a bunch of stuff. So I tell people don't let it be everything, because you're going to end up tired and your tank is going to be empty. Like what we do, creative stuff, comes from somewhere. It doesn't come from the universe. Like it comes from walks with your significant other, dinners, movies with people, family stuff, whatever. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from sitting there, click, click, click. Oh, more likes, good. Another post, I finished another logo for somebody. There's diminishing returns. And I think that's part of the fear, that they don't want to leave the being behind the computer and producing, because they're not going to get that gig that they want. But if they don't, they might not have the gas in the tank to do it.
What I would add to that is that it's a balance. I mean, I think the grind is real. I think you have to work for it. I think that's important, but I also think work-life balance is something you have to plan for, and I think it's something you have to make it a priority. And yeah, that's for family and that's for personal interests and whatever it is, but to your point, it's also to keep your head on a swivel so you can see the opportunities when they come. Because if your head's down, if you're exhausted, if you're not paying attention, opportunities will pass you by. And you have to keep your head on a swivel and keep your eyes open. And I would also throw this out there, and this is, again, a repeat conversation I had with a guy this morning, is that you got to knock on some doors. If you see somebody's doing that's cool, or if you're just like, hey, I gotta talk to that guy, don't wait, reach out, talk to that guy. And 9 out of 10 probably won't talk to you back, but the 1 out of 10 that do, you're going to get something out of it. And you gotta be willing to go after that stuff. Especially, I mean, we're sitting in this world today with everything so virtual and so digital, and the Zoom calls, and you don't have to write a longhand letter anymore. And you don't have to think that because somebody's on the East Coast, West Coast, or whatever, you don't have to believe that they're unreachable. Everybody's reachable. So that's part of it too, is you got to keep your head on a swivel, and you got to be brave in your communications.
I would add to that you need to use whatever experiences you're given, learn from them. And also something that's really undervalued that I sort of made my calling card in the space was make yourself available outside of where you think that you need to be. Something that was very helpful to me was that I had experience doing a lot of different things. And I'll never forget, I walked into a comic book store in Georgia. I live in Miami, but we were on vacation. And to your point, they were doing something interesting. They were doing something different. They were doing something fun. But what they weren't doing was taking advantage of the situation where they were in, where this comic book shop, as cool as it was not taking advantage of the fact that they were in a high tourist area. And I had recently read about, even if you're a regular business, if you're in a high tourist area and you're not taking advantage of those tourists, not taking advantage of in that way necessarily, but like leaning into, I am a cool shop in a cool place, in this place that you might not visit again, and you're not taking advantage of it with some kind of merch, you're probably missing out. And they had themed it with like wood paneling everywhere and taxidermy, and like a taxidermy beaver, and they'd done all this cool stuff. And I was like, why aren't you guys like using this? And on my vacation, I had this whole conversation with the guy behind the counter. Like, do you guys want to make t-shirts? Because you guys need to be making t-shirts with like a mascot of this beaver. You guys are in this, in the mountains of Georgia. It will not hurt your local business, but it will, like, if some dork who's on vacation like me comes in to buy comics because he sees the things that says Mountain Man Comics, and you've got to step into some place called Mountain Man Comics because it says, and you're expecting like the guy from the bounty roll or Paul Bunyan to be behind the counter for that, So I did a bunch of t-shirts for them. I walked away from vacation with a reoccurring gig because I said, I have t-shirt experience, I have illustration experience, and I have enough of a head for marketing to say, why aren't you guys doing this? Like, I'm not going to run your website. I have no interest in running your social media accounts or whatever, but I can tell you need a t-shirt. And it's one of those things, like, if I hadn't gone on vacation, if I hadn't done these things, and it didn't take away from my time, hanging out. It's not like I started it, while on vacation, but it's like you were saying, head on a swivel, like, look for these things.
Yeah. And you just go in and you have a conversation, you knock on a few doors and you share what you believe is semi-obvious to you, but maybe it's not obvious to them.
Yeah.
We do that with a lot of clients where I'm like, have you ever thought about doing a hat or I'm just thinking, I personally think your brand is cool and here's something that I think you could add to it that people would like. And it's typically stuff that they've never thought of. Well, Manny, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate you being a guest. Stay connected by following us on social media. There you'll find a steady flow of information on Cyberdogz, our customers, and the work that we do. Check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/CyberdogsMarketing, on Instagram at instagram.com/CyberdogsMarketing, or on Twitter at twitter.com/CyberdogsLTD.